All right. I'm here with Magister Ulrike Steiner, who just held a very interesting teacher talk about tightrope walking between NMS and AHS. First of all, how long have you been teaching in NMS and how long in AHS?
I've been teaching at NMS for 3 years now. I'm a form teacher as well, and my class is in 3rd grade.
If I understood it correctly, you taught at AHS first. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Were there any difficulties regarding your contract when you moved to NMS? Also taught
regarding
at
the
NMS?
contract itself, no, there were not that many problems, but within the work at NMS coming from AHS, there were problems. Problems in air quotes, to be honest. I was offered a job as a form teacher, head teacher of a class as well. And that was an amazing opportunity. And I started off being a form teacher from my year 1 on. And that was amazing. However, for example, I'm not allowed to teach other subjects such as Soziales Lernen. That's something that I'm not allowed to teach because my contract prohibits kind of that area. I'm only allowed to teach my main subjects, German and English, at Neue Mittelschule, but nothing else. And this is one of the aspects of the contract itself, coming from AHS. It is, of course, different if you have kind of the contract by the Land Steiermark, for example. But if you come from AHS with a contract from the Bund, this is the situation as it is at the moment. Of course, NMS is in progress. The development is, everything's developing. And one of the aspects is, one of the most important aspects is that also the contracts change because AHS teachers are retrieved to AHS or BHS, and depending also on the situation. And so we're work in progress. Stay tuned.
And you also talked a lot about diversity in the classroom regarding the different learner levels. You said that you deal with that mainly through differentiation and individualization. Could you explain those terms?
Mm-hmm. These are actually the keywords at NMS. You cannot deal with lesson plans, with all students in the most sense, without individualization and differentiation. It's of utmost importance. Differentiation means, and I break it down, to personalize instructions. Differentiated instructions mean personalizing as much as possible to meet the learner's aims and goals, what he can achieve, and so that the student can actually grow his or her potential at its best. Individualization means assessing each student and trying to focus on each student, observing each student and his abilities in his situation or her situation, gender. And that's important too, kind of the assessment, not as in the meaning of grading, but assessing, having a very close look at the student and trying to figure out a way how to deal with instructions for that student at its best, basically. And that's what we try very hard at this.
Another concept you mentioned was the web's depths of knowledge. Mm-hmm. What are the depths of knowledge?
They're basically, I also try to explain it as easy as possible. It's basically different stages, 4 stages of knowledge. And this is something that we use at NMS to come up with our instructions. For example, the first stage would be remembering. Okay? In German, we would say erinnern. The student gets some input in the lesson and has to remember what he has learned, basically. And the instruction helps him to remember, and he has to, for example, write a text, including all the things that he remembers from that lesson. And that kind of proceeds with each step, coming to the 4th step, which means that the student has to come up on the basis of his knowledge that he has gained, on the experiences that he has gained with a new concept idea, with new concepts generally, and has to formulate them, and, formulate them for others, for example.
In the NMS especially, you do a lot of intermediate planning.
Mm-hmm.
How does that compare to the normal year plan? Is it the same or is it different?
It is. Of course, it has to be the same. There are parts of the planning of the year that are taken, and there are more details to it. That's kind of the most important thing. We think about the aims, we think about the goals, the objectives, and so on and so forth, and we try to put it down, break it down to what we actually need for our lesson plans for teaching, basically, in every lesson. And since we have kind of the same content in year 3, 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, they all have the same content. That's an approach that the NMS is taking and has been taking for the past, let's say, 6 years. So basically it is the same, parts are the same, but it's in more detail. It's a more detailed explanation and more detailed planning. And it should be transparent. That's the most important, not only for the teachers, but also for the parents, for the students as well.
Another important thing is grading, of course. And grading works very differently in the NMS. Could you quickly explain how it works?
Grading at NMS and assessment at NMS is, of course, completely different. We have sehr gut, gut, befriedigend, genügend, vertieft. And then we have befriedigend, genügend, grundlegend, and then we have the nicht genügend. So all in all, we have 7 grades. That sounds difficult, but the meaning behind it is that you differentiate between students that could actually achieve AHS standard and students that have difficulties in achieving these goals. This is kind of the meaning behind the assessment scale at NMS. At AHS, it's not completely different, but we only have 5 grades. Sehr gut, gut, befriedigend, genügend, nicht genügend, and that's fine. But of course, to pass, for example, to pass a test or to pass a Schularbeit of any kind, you have to be beyond 60%, for instance. At NMS, it's different. You're still positive even though you've just achieved 26, 27% because you have the Grundlegend. So this is kind of the big difference between the grading system.
And a bit more personal question. You mentioned vocabulary tests. What's your personal opinion of them?
Oh, I hate them. I hate vocab revisions, and at BG1, I never do them. I do it implicitly, and I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. For me, a vocabulary check is not useless. I don't judge because a lot of my colleagues, they actually embrace these vocabulary revisions, but I do it differently. I let them talk, use the vocab. I force them differently to study the vocab because if they want to talk about a topic, they have to know the word somehow. And if they don't know the exact word, well, if they know a synonym or if they are capable of explaining it, good to go. Absolutely fine. This is just my personal opinion on it. I do vocabulary checks, you could say implicitly, with different methods. But as I said, I'm not judging. On the contrary, I think it is of utmost importance to accept as many diverse methods as possible because it makes education as rich as possible. And that's actually the fascinating thing. Everyone has a different angle, a different linchpin, the teachers, the students, and so on and so forth. And what works for one class doesn't work for the other class. For my class at BG1, these things do not occur. I do them implicitly, but for example, at my NMS class, they like the idea of having a vocab revision. They like it, and I sometimes have to do them, but I don't think it's, for me personally, the greatest idea of assessing.
Last question, what does the future of the NMS hold? What do you think?
This is actually quite apparent. I've also covered it partly in my teacher's talk today. The future of the NMS is quite diverse, and it is, at the moment, it's kind of a feeling of unsteadiness. There's a lot of development going on, and one of the big development issues will be the Leistungsgruppen. I put it in air quotes because the equivalent in English wouldn't work that well. The Leistungsgruppen will come back. There's AHS Standard and Standard. This is the situation from that moment on. Of course, there are even more things that are changing, especially the retrieving of the AHS teachers, including myself. Teachers are actually retrieved back to AHS BHS. The reason is, from my perspective, because they want to save money. That's kind of the most apparent one. And the second one is to make kind of the execution of the contracts a little bit easier. Because, of course, it's complicated to have different well, we have the Land Steiermark and you have the Bund Österreich, and of course they have different approaches to the contracts and so on and so forth. So this will definitely change from my perspective, and some of the things have already been discussed in the newspapers as well. So there's a lot going on in the next couple of years. There have always been a lot of changes, and what I can say, especially the NMS or the compulsory school system with a focus on the NMS, is in a very special situation because political decisions have had an impact especially on NMS, especially on the compulsory school system. I say especially, not merely, but especially. The Empress Maria Therese has already said it. Schule ist Politikum. School is politics. And that is so true for NMS, for school, for education. What I believe in, what I very strongly believe in, is that the idea, the concept of NMS will stay the same. We have children, they are in the center. We have a very student-centered approach at NMS and AHS as well. It's also true for AHS. And I think to meet all those learners' needs will stay the same. Because after all, the future of our kids, the future of our students should be our biggest goal, should be our biggest aim. And that's what I believe in and what I work for every single day, to provide the students with the best future possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.